What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars walks onto a daytime talk show set, expecting a friendly chat, and instead finds himself in the middle of a verbal ambush that spirals so far out of control that security has to get involved? It only took 45 seconds of Whoopi Goldberg's opening question for the entire interview to explode into what witnesses are calling the most shocking moment in daytime television history. Ryan Reynolds sat down on that famous couch, thinking he was there to talk about his latest projects and maybe share some laughs with the panel. The audience was buzzing with excitement. People loved Ryan. He had that charm, that quick wit, that genuine warmth that made everyone feel like they were talking to a friend. He waved to the crowd as he walked out, that signature smile on his face, completely unaware that he was about to be blindsided. Whoopi didn't even let him get comfortable. Before Ryan could fully settle into his seat, before the applause had even died down, she launched right into it. Her tone was sharp, accusatory, nothing like the warm welcome guests usually received. "So Ryan, let's talk about something that's been bothering me," Whoopi said, leaning forward with her arms crossed. "You've built this whole persona as this nice guy, this family man. But we've been hearing things. We've been hearing that you're not quite what you seem." Ryan's smile faltered. He looked confused, glancing around at the other hosts, as if trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension immediately. "I'm sorry, what?" Ryan asked, his voice still friendly but uncertain. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean," Whoopi shot back. "You come on these shows, you charm everyone, but behind the scenes, we hear different stories. We hear about demands, about attitude, about treating people like they're beneath you." Joy Behar jumped in, and her tone wasn't much better. "I have to say, Whoopi has a point. We've done our research. There are rumors, Ryan, and where there's smoke, there's usually fire." Ryan sat up straighter, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder. "Wait, hold on. You're ambushing me with rumors. Unverified gossip? Is that what this is?" "We're asking questions," Whoopi said, her voice rising. "That's what we do here. We ask the tough questions that other shows won't ask. And I think our audience deserves to know who you really are." Sonny Hostin chimed in from the end of the table. "Ryan, you have to understand. When you're in the public eye, people talk. And when multiple sources say the same things, it becomes a pattern." "Multiple sources?" Ryan repeated, his voice getting firmer. "What sources? Who are these people? Because I can tell you right now, whatever you've heard is not true. I work with the same crews over and over again. I have long relationships with people in this industry. If I was this terrible person you're describing, why would anyone want to work with me twice?" Whoopi waved her hand dismissively. "People work with difficult people all the time in Hollywood. It's called business. They put up with it because of the money, because of the fame. That doesn't mean they like it." The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't fun banter. This wasn't a playful back and forth. This was hostile, and everyone could feel it. "This is unbelievable," Ryan said, shaking his head. "I came here thinking we were going to have a conversation. I've watched this show. I've seen you have guests on, and it's usually respectful, even when you disagree. But this? You're accusing me of things you can't even prove. Based on what? Anonymous sources? Rumors?" "We're journalists," Whoopi said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We don't just make things up." "Journalists?" Ryan's voice was sharp now. "Journalists verify their sources. Journalists give people a chance to respond before they air accusations. You didn't reach out to me before this. You didn't ask for my side. You just decided to put me on blast on national television." Joy leaned in, trying to pile on. "Ryan, you're getting very defensive. That's usually a sign that someone has something to hide." "Defensive?" Ryan's eyes widened. "You're attacking my character based on nothing, and you expect me to just sit here and smile? That's not defensive. That's called standing up for yourself. Alyssa Farah Griffin, who had been quiet up until this point, finally spoke up. I think maybe we should let Ryan actually talk about why he's here. This seems like it's getting off track. No, Whoopi snapped, turning to Alyssa. This is exactly on track. This is about accountability. This is about not letting celebrities come on here and get a free pass just because they're charming. Ryan stood up. The movement was sudden enough that everyone stopped talking. He looked directly at Whoopi, his jaw set. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about it. You just accused me of being a bad person, of mistreating people, with zero evidence. You didn't give me a heads up. You didn't verify anything. You just went for it because you thought it would make good television. And now you're sitting there acting like you're some kind of moral authority? Sit down, Whoopi said, her voice hard. You're a guest on this show. I'm not sitting down, Ryan said firmly. And you know what? I'm not doing this. I'm not going to sit here and let you trash my reputation based on gossip and rumors. I've spent years building relationships, treating people with respect, working hard, and you think you can just tear that down in 5 minutes? Sonny tried to interject. Ryan, if you would just let us explain. Explain what? Ryan turned to her. Explain how it's okay to ambush someone. Explain how rumors are now facts. I don't need that explanation. Whoopi stood, up too now, and her face was flushed with anger. You think you can just walk off this show? You think you're too good to answer questions? I think I deserve basic respect, Ryan said, his voice steady but intense. And I'm not getting it here. You made up your mind about me before I even walked out here. This wasn't an interview. This was a hit job. Oh, please, Whoopi scoffed. You're being dramatic. We ask tough questions to everyone. Tough questions are fine, Ryan said, but you need to have something to back them up. You need to give people a fair chance. You didn't do that. You just wanted to create a moment, and you didn't care if you destroyed someone's reputation in the process. Joy stood up now too, her voice getting louder. You need to calm down. This is our show, and we run it how we see fit. Then run it without me, Ryan said. He started to walk away from the couch. Whoopi called out after him, her voice echoing across the studio. You're proving our point. You can't handle criticism. You can't handle someone questioning you. Ryan stopped and turned back. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was frozen. That's not criticism, Ryan said, pointing back at the table. Criticism is constructive. Criticism is based on facts. What you did was character assassination based on nothing. There's a difference, and if you can't see that, that's on you. Get out then, Whoopi shouted. If you can't handle this, then leave. I am leaving, Ryan said, because I don't have to sit here and take this. And for everyone watching, please understand something. I came here in good faith. I came here ready to have a conversation. But sometimes you walk into a situation and realize that no matter what you say, no matter how you respond, the other person has already decided who you are. And when that happens, the only thing you can do is walk away. Sonny tried one more time. Ryan, wait, maybe we can reset this. But Ryan was already moving toward the exit. A producer rushed onto the stage, trying to figure out what to do. Security personnel appeared at the edges of the set, unsure if they needed to intervene. Whoopi wasn't done. She called out again, her voice cutting across the studio. This is what happens when celebrities can't handle the real world. They run away. Ryan paused at the edge of the stage, and for a moment, it looked like he might turn back. But then he just shook his head and kept walking. The camera caught him disappearing behind the curtain, and then the feed cut to a stunned silence on the panel. Joy looked at Whoopi. Well, that escalated. He couldn't handle it, Whoopi said, still angry, still defensive. That's the problem with these people. They want all the glory, but none of the accountability. Alyssa spoke up, and there was disapproval in her voice. I think we might have pushed too hard there. Those were pretty serious accusations with nothing to back them up. Whose side are you on? Whoopi snapped at her. I'm not on a side, Alyssa said carefully. I'm just saying, as someone who cares about journalism, we need to be fair. And that didn't feel fair. The audience was still silent. Usually, after a dramatic moment, there would be applause or gasps or something. But this time, there was just uncomfortable quiet. People didn't know how to react. They'd watched someone they admired get attacked, and then watched him defend himself and leave. It wasn't entertaining. It was painful. Sonny tried to smooth things over. I think we all got a little heated there. Maybe we should take a break. But Whoopi wasn't interested in smoothing anything over. No, we're not taking a break. We're going to talk about what just happened. We asked legitimate questions, and he couldn't handle it. That tells you everything you need to know. Does it, though? Alyssa pushed back. Because from where I was sitting, it looked like we made accusations we couldn't prove. And when he called us out on it, we doubled down instead of admitting maybe we went too far. Joy tried to defend Whoopi. We were doing our jobs. We were asking questions. But what questions? Alyssa pressed. What specifically did we ask that was based on verified information? Because I didn't hear any. The tension on the panel now was as bad as it had been with Ryan. The hosts were turning on each other, and the audience was watching it all unfold. Whoopi glared at Alyssa. I've been doing this for decades. I know how to interview someone. I'm not questioning your experience, Alyssa said. I'm questioning the approach we just took. Well, nobody asked you, Whoopi snapped. Sonny jumped in, trying to play peacemaker. Ladies, we're all on the same team here. Let's not forget that. Are we? Alyssa asked. Because right now, it feels like we just damaged this show's reputation by going after someone without cause. The producers were frantically signaling from off camera. They needed to cut to commercial. They needed to stop this before it got worse. But Whoopi was on a roll, and she wasn't stopping. You know what the problem is? Whoopi said, looking directly into the camera. The problem is that people like Ryan Reynolds think they're untouchable. They think they can coast on charm and good looks, and nobody will ever question them. Well, we question people here. That's what we do. But you have to have something to question them about, Alyssa insisted. You can't just throw out accusations and hope something sticks. Joy tried to get things back on track. Maybe we can talk about this during the commercial break. There's nothing to talk about, Whoopi said. I stand by what we did. If he can't handle tough questions, that's his problem, not ours. The audience was starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. They'd come to see their favorite talk show, maybe see a celebrity guest, have some laughs. Instead, they'd watched a beloved actor get ambushed and then watched the hosts fight among themselves. Sonny made one more attempt to salvage things. I think what we can all agree on is that emotions ran high. Sometimes that happens in live television. Maybe we could have handled it differently, and maybe Ryan could have handled it differently. But it's done now. I don't think I could have handled it differently, Whoopi said stubbornly. I asked the questions I needed to ask. Based on what? Alyssa wouldn't let it go. I keep asking this, and nobody will answer me. Based on what information did we decide to confront him like that? Whoopi stood up from the table. I don't have to justify myself to you or anyone else. This is my show. It's our show, Joy corrected quietly. Fine, our show, Whoopi said. And on our show, we hold people accountable. But he didn't do anything, Alyssa said, her voice rising in frustration. That's the point. We accused him of doing things, but we had no proof. That's not accountability. That's just mean. The word hung in the air. Mean. It was such a simple word, but it captured exactly what had happened. The whole thing had been mean, unnecessarily cruel, a blindside attack on someone who'd done nothing to deserve it. Whoopi's face went red. How dare you? I'm sorry, Alyssa said, though she didn't sound sorry. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that was okay. It wasn't. The producers finally got through. The signal to cut to commercial was impossible to ignore. The camera switched off the live feed, but in the studio, the argument continued. Backstage, Ryan was still there. He hadn't left the building yet. A makeup person approached him, looking sympathetic. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Ryan took a deep breath. "Yeah, I'm okay. That was just... I wasn't expecting that." "Nobody was," she said. "For what it's worth, I think you handled it well." "I probably should have stayed calm," Ryan said. "But when someone comes at you like that, with no warning, no evidence, just straight into accusations, I don't know how you're supposed to react." "You reacted like a human being," another crew member said, walking over. "You stood up for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that." Ryan nodded, but he still looked shaken. This wasn't how he operated. He was used to friendly interviews, to playful banter, to mutual respect. This had been something else entirely. Back on the set, during the commercial break, the hosts were still going at it. Whoopi refused to back down. Joy was trying to support her, while also acknowledging maybe things had gone too far. Sunny was attempting to be diplomatic, and Alyssa was standing firm that what they'd done was wrong. "We're going to lose viewers over this," Alyssa warned. "People love Ryan Reynolds. They're going to see this and think we're bullies." "Then let them think that," Whoopi said defiantly. "I'm not apologizing for doing my job." "Your job isn't to make up stories about people," Alyssa shot back. "I didn't make up anything," Whoopi insisted. "I asked questions based on things I'd heard." "From who?" Alyssa demanded. "Give me one name, one source, one shred of evidence that anything you said about him was true." Whoopi couldn't. She didn't have names. She didn't have sources. She'd heard vague gossip, the kind that floats around about every celebrity, and she'd decided to run with it without verification. The silence that followed Alyssa's challenge said everything. Joy finally spoke up. "Maybe we did jump the gun a little bit." "A little bit?" Alyssa looked at her incredulously. "We ambushed a guest with false accusations on live television. That's more than a little bit." Sunny sighed. "What's done is done. We need to figure out how to move forward." "We move forward by owning it," Alyssa said. "We come back from commercial and we acknowledge that we handled that poorly." "I'm not doing that," Whoopi said flatly. "Then I will," Alyssa replied. The producer counted them down. 10 seconds until they were back live. The hosts took their seats, tension still crackling between them. When the cameras came back on, Alyssa spoke first, before anyone could stop her. "Before we continue with the show, I need to say something about what just happened. I think we owe Ryan Reynolds an apology. We made accusations that we couldn't back up, and when he rightfully called us out on it, instead of acknowledging our mistake, we got defensive. That wasn't fair to him, and it wasn't fair to our audience." Whoopi's expression was stony. She didn't say anything. Joy looked uncomfortable. "Well, I think we all have different perspectives on what happened." "There's only one perspective that matters," Alyssa said. "The truth. And the truth is, we didn't have evidence for what we claimed. We should have done better." The audience started to applaud. Slowly at first, then louder. They appreciated the honesty. They appreciated someone on the panel acknowledging what everyone had seen. Whoopi finally spoke, her voice tight. "I stand by my questions." The applause died down. The audience wasn't applauding that. Sunny tried to find middle ground. "I think we can all learn from this. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, things get said that maybe could have been phrased differently." "It wasn't the phrasing," Alyssa said. "It was the content. We accused him of being someone he's not, and we had nothing to base that on." "Can we please move on?" Whoopi said sharply. "We have a show to do." But moving on wasn't that simple. The damage was done. The interview that was supposed to be a fun, lighthearted conversation with a beloved celebrity had turned into a disaster, and now the hosts couldn't even agree among themselves about what had happened. Joy tried to introduce the next segment, but her heart clearly wasn't in it. The energy in the studio had completely shifted. The audience was subdued. The hosts were fractured. And somewhere outside the building, Ryan Reynolds was probably wondering what on earth had just happened. The makeup person who'd checked on Ryan earlier came back to find him. "They're arguing about it on air now," she told him. "Alyssa is defending you." Ryan shook his head. "She shouldn't have to defend me. I didn't do anything wrong. That's the whole point." "We know," the crew member from earlier said. "Everyone back here knows. We work with celebrities all the time, and you've always been nothing but kind and professional." "Then why did this happen?" Ryan asked, more to himself than to them. Why would they do this? Nobody had a good answer for that. Maybe Whoopi was having a bad day. Maybe she'd heard something and decided to believe it without checking. Maybe she thought going hard on a celebrity would make for good television. Whatever the reason, it had backfired spectacularly. On stage, the show limped through the rest of the broadcast. Every segment felt forced. The chemistry between the hosts, usually one of the show's strengths, was completely gone. Whoopi barely looked at Alyssa. Joy kept trying to lighten the mood with jokes that fell flat. Sunny did her best to keep things professional, but even she seemed worn down by it all. When they finally cut to the last commercial break before the end of the show, Whoopi stood up without a word and walked off the set. She didn't say goodbye to the audience. She didn't wait for the formal wrap. She just left. The remaining hosts looked at each other. "Well," Joy said weakly, "that was a show." Alyssa looked directly at the camera, even though they were in commercial. "For anyone watching who feels like what happened to Ryan was wrong, you're right. It was wrong, and I'm sorry we put him through that." The show ended minutes later with an awkward farewell from the three remaining hosts. Usually they'd all wave together, make a joke, tease tomorrow's show. This time they just said goodnight and dispersed. Ryan finally left the building. He walked out the side exit where a car was waiting for him. He didn't speak to the reporters who'd somehow already heard about the incident and gathered outside. He just got in the car and left. Inside the studio, crew members were already talking about what they'd witnessed. In television, especially live television, things go wrong sometimes. Guests get uncomfortable. Hosts say things they shouldn't. But this was different. This was a deliberate attack on someone who'd done nothing to deserve it, and when he'd defended himself, he'd been vilified for it. The makeup person who'd been kind to Ryan packed up her station. "I've worked on this show for 8 years, she told a colleague. "I've never seen anything like that." "Do you think he'll ever come back?" the colleague asked. She laughed bitterly. "Would you?" The answer was obvious. No. Ryan Reynolds would never come back to The View. Why would he? He'd been ambushed, attacked, and when he'd stood up for himself, he'd been told he was the problem. No amount of apologies or explanations could undo that. In the control room, the producers were already in crisis mode. They knew this was going to be everywhere. Social media was probably already exploding. News outlets would pick it up. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was a public relations nightmare. And for what? What had they gained? They'd wanted to create a memorable moment, to show they weren't afraid to ask tough questions. Instead, they'd shown they were willing to attack someone without cause, and when called out, they doubled down instead of admitting fault. Alyssa sat in her dressing room afterward, already getting messages from people thanking her for speaking up. But she felt exhausted. She'd had to fight her own co-host on air just to acknowledge basic fairness. That shouldn't have been necessary. Joy knocked on her door. "Hey, that got intense." "Yeah," Alyssa said simply. "I think you might have been right," Joy admitted quietly, "about all of it." "I know I was right," Alyssa said, not unkindly. "The question is, what happens now?" Joy didn't have an answer for that. None of them did. The show would go on. They'd come back tomorrow, and the day after that. But something had broken today. The trust between the hosts. The trust with the audience. The reputation they'd built. All because they decided to go after someone who didn't deserve it, based on nothing more than gossip and the desire to create a moment. Ryan Reynolds had walked onto that stage as one of the most likable people in entertainment. He'd walked off still being that person, but now everyone knew he also had a backbone. He wouldn't just sit there and take unfair treatment. He'd stand up for himself, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it meant walking away. The View had positioned itself as a place for tough conversations, for holding people accountable. But today, they'd shown the difference between accountability and accusations, between tough questions and unfair attacks, between journalism and gossip. And in the end, when forced to choose between admitting fault and defending the indefensible, most of the panel had chosen wrong. The audience had seen it. The crew had seen it. And now, as the story spread beyond that studio, the whole world would see it too. What started as an interview had become a case study in how quickly things can go wrong when you forget the basic principles of fairness and respect. When you decide that creating drama is more important than treating people with dignity. Ryan Reynolds didn't need The View. He had plenty of other platforms, plenty of other opportunities. But The View might have needed him more than they realized. Not him specifically, but the goodwill that comes from treating guests with respect. The trust that comes from being fair. The reputation that comes from doing things right. They'd gambled all of that for a moment of confrontation, and they'd lost. The lights in the studio were turned off. The crew went home. The hosts went their separate ways. And somewhere in New York City, Ryan Reynolds was probably on the phone with his wife, telling her about the strangest, most hostile interview of his career. Tomorrow would bring think pieces and social media debates, and probably some carefully worded statements from the show's representatives. But none of that would change what happened today. One man had walked onto a stage expecting respect, and instead found hostility. And when he'd refused to accept that treatment, when he'd stood up and walked away, he'd shown more integrity than the people who were supposed to be asking the questions. That was the real story. Not the shouting or the accusations or the dramatic exit. The real story was about dignity, about knowing when to stand your ground and when to walk away, about refusing to let others define you through their baseless attacks. Ryan Reynolds had come to The View as a guest. He'd left as someone who'd taught a lesson in self-respect, even if it wasn't the lesson anyone had planned. And that studio, which had hosted thousands of interviews over the years, would remember this one. Not because it was good television, but because it was a reminder of what happens when you forget that the people sitting across from you are human beings who deserve fairness, respect, and the truth. None of which they'd gotten today. The crew members cleaning up the studio moved quietly, efficiently. They'd all been doing this long enough to know when something significant had happened. Usually, after a taping, there would be chatter, jokes, discussions about funny moments, or interesting guests. Tonight there was just silence, and the occasional knowing look between colleagues. One camera operator stopped by the couch where Ryan had sat. He could still picture the moment when Ryan's expression changed from confused to defensive to resolute. That progression had told the whole story. A good person pushed too far, finally deciding enough was enough. The makeup person finished packing her kit and headed toward the exit. On her way out, she passed by one of the producers who'd been frantically trying to manage the chaos during the commercial breaks. "That was rough," she said simply. The producer just nodded, looking tired. "We're going to be dealing with this for weeks." And they would be, because in the age of social media and instant replay, moments like this didn't just disappear. They lived forever, analyzed and discussed and shared. People who hadn't even watched the show would see clips. They'd form opinions. They'd take sides. The only question was, which side would win in the court of public opinion? The beloved actor who'd stood up for himself, or the talk show hosts who'd attacked him without cause?